Welcome to the program. I'm Opeyemi, Owoseni. We start off with business news. The Securities and Exchange Commission has announced that it is investigating 79 suspected Ponzi schemes, including one operating under the name FF Tiffany. The Commission, in a statement, revealed that FF Tiffany has been widely reported for allegedly running a fraudulent investment operation that has defrauded thousands of Nigerians both at home and abroad. The SEC added that preliminary findings indicate that the scheme promised investors unusually high and unrealistic returns, resulting in the loss of several billions of naira. Now describing the development as a serious threat to investors' confidence and the integrity of the financial system, the Commission assured the public that it is working closely with law enforcement agencies and other relevant authorities to ensure that all individuals involved in the illegal operation are brought to justice. The Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, says Nigeria's average daily crude oil production increased to 1,505 million barrels per day in June 2025. OPEC spoke on Nigeria's drilling performance in its latest monthly market report. The oil cartel said the production figures were obtained through direct communication with Nigerian authorities. According to the report, the current output signifies a 3.58% rise from the 1.453 million barrels per day production volume recorded in May, also representing the highest output since January 2025. We'll go on a break now and be back with update from the corporate world. Welcome back. Now, Sterling Bank PLC has announced plans to raise up to $400 million in capital through a range of financing options, including debt instruments and equity offerings. The move comes after the bank's second annual general meeting held virtually, where shareholders approved a capital raise to strengthen the institution's growth capacity and balance sheet. In a corporate statement signed by the company secretary Adeyola Temple, Sterling Bank revealed that the capital will be raised through the creation of a shelf program, allowing the bank to issue financial instruments in tranches or series over a defined period. And Africa's leading e-commerce platform, Jumia, has appointed Temidayo Ojo as the new Chief Executive Officer of Jumia Nigeria, marking a significant leadership transition within the company. The appointment, announced on the 14th of July, sees Ojo succeeds Sunil Natraj, who led Jumia Nigeria through a period of economic and operational change, restoring growth and consumer confidence. According to the company, Ojo's elevation is part of Jumia's strategy to empower local leaders and develop talent from within its organization. Ojo joined Jumia in 2020 as the head of planning and performance before moving up to Chief Commercial Officer. He later served as the CEO of Jumia Ghana, where he steered the business to record-breaking growth while also fostering a strong team culture. We'll go on a short break now, but when Money Matters return, we'll be discussing Dangote Refinery cutting down petrol price. I'll bring you more details after this break. Welcome back. The Dangote Refinery is causing a stir in the fuel industry in Nigeria. This year, when it forced the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation (NNPC) into a pricing war, inadvertently dominating the fuel market. Just last week, the Dangote Refinery reduced the gantry price of premium motor spirit, also known as petrol, by 4.5%, and it currently sells for 820 naira per litre. Now, it is rolling out plans to distribute fuel to independent dealers across the country for free and also offer credit to its customers, a move that is expected to cut off competition from fuel marketers depending on import and also cut off bulk fuel storage services. Now, this move is also expected to reduce production and transportation costs nationwide. It follows a recent hike by Dangote, NNPC and other marketers in response to Middle East tensions, particularly the Israel-Iran conflict. But while others maintain high prices, Dangote has now reversed course, citing adjustments in the global supply chain. However, some observers are warning that Dangote's increasingly dominant position could pave the way for a monopoly, with long-term consequences for pricing and market fairness. Now, let's discuss this. Mr. Jide Pratt, the Chief Operating Officer of Iona and the Country Manager at Trade Grid, joins me on the program. Thank you for your time, Mr. Pratt. Now, Dangote Refinery recently cut petrol prices up by 4.5% and is also offering free distribution to independent marketers in the country. Now, what do you make of this strategy, and do you also think it is sustainable?
Okay, thanks for talking to me. So let's start from the beginning. In downstream petroleum, what you have to be able to get products from either your tank farm or your refinery to your stations where you call underground tanks to be able to sell is supply and distribution. So what the Dangote Refinery as a company has decided to do is that she wants to integrate her whole supply chain from the supply end, which is where she would refine it into her tanks. Then she will now use trucks to move it from the point of refining or the point of import, as the case may be, to the underground tank, which is the retail space. Now, in doing that, you find out that when people are established in oil and gas over a period of time, they integrate their supply chain models. So any company you look at, you find out that they had a jetty, they had vessels to bring in products, they had storage tanks, which are depots, and then they have fuel outlets, retail stations. So the Dangote Refinery is trying to go that route to say that once I refine my products into tanks, I'm going to offer transportation, which is what we call the distribution, to partners, because don't forget, the Dangote Refinery doesn't have retail stations, but she has partners who should decide to say, okay, what volumes are you buying? Let me tie you into some sort of transaction dynamics so that I can lift the products on your behalf and deliver it to your stations. Now, this is where it gets tricky, because you talked about the fact that, is it sustainable? I'm not so sure it is on a P&L basis, because in supply and distribution, there is a cost for freight or transportation of petroleum product. There's what you call local, and in the old times, there's what you call bridging. So it's local because it's under 100 kilometers or 0 to 50, as the case may be. And it's bridging when you have to go above 300 and 350 kilometers. So let's use an example that to get to Kano is 14 naira per liter. What it does mean is that if you buy products, and for the purpose of this conversation, assume you bought petrol at 800 naira a liter. If you needed to take it to Kano and it's going to cost you 40 naira per liter, that's 840. Once you get to the retail station, there's what you call a dealer's commission or margin. So if you put 10 naira on that, then that's 850. So I'm struggling to see how it's going to be sustainable over a long period of time to absorb the transportation cost, unless they treat it as a capex item and then allow whoever the partners are in terms of the transportation to pay that cost. I hope that answers your first question, Joy.
Now, would you describe this as a full-blown price war in Nigeria's fuel market? And if that's the case, what would you say are the implications of such a development?
So what it says is that ideally, in a market that is deregulated, that market should allow free entry and free exit. That said, in a situation where a single player takes a large chunk of the market, it has dissuaded competition and free entry and exit. However, if you look at it from a market positioning strategy, it does mean that if someone builds a refinery, the person can decide to integrate using partnerships as many ways as they can to take a larger market share. However, the question I ask is that when you put petrol in a bucket or you put power in a bucket, there seems to be some, and let me use the word predisposition that it should not be kept in one hand because there's a security implication to it. So I said that to say this. When you go into energy security, you look about things being, there's what they call the quadruple A: availability, affordability, adaptability, and accessibility. The refinery in question is a single train. So what it does mean is that if she needs to do a turnaround maintenance, what is going to happen is that she's probably going to have to shut down her RFCC. And probably the CDU will stay up, but it will reduce the output that comes from that refinery. That said, if all players are not equally playing, well, not equally, but if all players are not allowed to play in that same environment, then we have a problem because there could be shortages. So from an energy security point of view, market share is good to have, but I do not believe it should rest in one hand beyond a certain percentage. I hope that answers you.
Now, I would like to know how this move would affect other players in the market, especially few importers, depot owners, and even smaller independent marketers.
Now, it's going to be a shock, and let's be extremely clear. If you read the statement spoke to people who were willing and able to buy 500,000 liters and then up to 1 million liters. So it tried to solve two problems for those people by saying, if you can buy up to 500, pay for 500, we'll deliver it to you free. And then it now means that the other 500, you get the bank guarantee. That could work for people who are established in business. Your question speaks to, and I use the word small and medium scale. The man who buys 1 or 2 trucks doesn't fall into that bracket. So it means that he or she might not be able to muscle up the cash for 500,000 liters. If they already have 1 or 2 trucks that they're using for their transportation, they've integrated that into their model. So they buy from a depot and take to their retail station. It does mean that for people like that, there's a massive threat to their business. However, there are other companies who take those kind of advantages and begin to look for ways to deliver product to those kinds. You have companies like TradeGrid that are already doing this. So what it does mean is that there is a shock in the system for those people. If we move to those who are more established, then what you find out is happening is that there's also a threat because the way prices undulate, because their volumes are not as high as the refinery volumes, they will struggle to adjust in a manner that is, so to speak, flexible. Those implications are rife for them. So you'd also find out some marketers might begin to look at it and look, what is the size of my station outlet? If I have 40 stations, if I have 50 stations, then maybe I need to begin to import to feed my stations so that I stay in business. So it will now become a choice for people. Proximity, things like look and feel of the organization's forecourt, pump integrity. These are things that people will begin to look at. If I drive into station A, what are the non-fuel revenue benefits that I get from driving into that station? So it will affect smaller players. There will be a shock in the system. There's no doubt about that, Joy. But it also means that people are going to be nimble. A man who has 40 stations might look at it that, okay, do I need just 40 or do I need 20? But the implication, sadly, is that while people say that the refinery going this way means more jobs, it also means less job for those who are not at that scale. That is the harsh reality about it.
Now, some industry watchers believe that Dangote is edging towards monopolizing the downstream sector. Do you see this as a genuine concern?
Well, if you take a market and you own 10% of it, then there's nothing to bother about. Any market that someone has the potential to take 60 to 70% is a worry. A lot of people say, why don't you other people just come together and build a refinery? Sadly, not everybody is going to build a refinery. You have people who've built terminals for over 20, 25 years. They can't pack it up and put it in their back pocket. So what it means is that this moves into the space of what you call fair competition, FCCPC. And it also goes into what you call proper regulation of the sector, NMDPRA. So it means that the ladies and gentlemen in those two organizations need to look at this from a prism as in what is the best combination for Nigeria. It's not about whether it's a refinery, it's not about businesses that are already there. What is the best deregulated model for the economy? How much control is enough? How much control is more than enough? These are things that people need to sit down, people need to regulate, and people need to look at on the prism of fair and competitive pricing. Again, you don't deregulate a society and then stifle it. If you deregulate a part of the economy, you must allow competition to fester. Those are my thoughts on that, Joy.
Now, if Dangote becomes the dominant supplier, what long-term risk or benefit could that pose for fuel pricing and consumer access in Nigeria?
And again, I think we spoke about this when I was talking about energy security and the quadruple A's. NNPC right now majorly is playing catch-up because she doesn't have functional refineries. So ideally, you should buy from the Dangote Refinery or import a petroleum product. But once someone takes a position in the market as a market leader, then everybody else is going to follow. The size of the Dangote Refinery is enough to give that refinery an added advantage. Now, what does it mean potentially going forward? It means, and again, back to regulation and fair pricing and competition. There must be a way to look at it that all players that have quote and unquote the ability and capacity to play are allowed to play. There needs to be some guide from the market, even though it's deregulated, to say these are the input pricings based on Platts, based on ICE, based on Eurobob. This is the exchange rate. This is what a fair landed price should be. At that point, people can take a decision. Do I buy from the refinery or do I go ahead and import? But it shouldn't be a case of either or where we're saying that it's fully 100% refined products alone or 100% imports alone. No, there needs to be a balance and choice must be at the hand of the consumers. Quality needs to be regulated so that people are not bringing in just any kind of petroleum products into the country, but are bringing in products that meet standards. One good thing that we've seen in all this is that there used to be a lot of an issue around FX paucity. That seems to be going away. So right now, you find out more banks are able to open LCs. Maybe that's one way to look at it. So more players can play in terms of the import. Import permits are still being given out, as they should. But Joy, what is still most important is that there must be a balance. And that balance needs to be pushed from regulation and fair competition.
Now let's talk about regulators like the Nigerian Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority. How exactly do you think they can be useful, or what role do you think they should be playing at this point in time?
The NMDPA has a very, very massive job and role to play, and she might be struggling to do it. But it's time to push data. It's time to push visibility. So if you went to the website of the Ghana Petroleum Authority, NPA, they have a guiding template which shows you what Platts is, what crude oil is, what ICE is. It shows you what freight levels are, shows you what the exchange rate is, so that it shows you an assumed, and that's the word, assumed landed cost if you were importing products into Ghana. So in Ghana, they have what they call the BDCs, who are the bulk distribution companies that import. So someone doesn't just come as a BDC and put a price into the market that is with no basis. So right now, what does the NMDPRA need to do? We need to get into a stage where they're saying that, look, this is the amount that we make or we use daily in Nigeria. Data now needs to start speaking. Based on that, this is the amount that we're giving as import permits. This is the amount that is coming out locally as refined petroleum products, so that they strike a guided template and balance, so that there are no scarcities, there are no price gouging, and this needs to be done. They also need to sensitize the public more. There's a lot of conversation around oil and gas that I'm sorry, I would say sometimes it's more of a fallacy. People just assume notions. There needs to be deeper understanding. There needs to be people speaking about things like this so that people are guided. But you see, data needs to be able to guide it. So if I went to the NMDPRA's website today, I should see assumed landed costs based on the parameters. I should see a price breakdown. I should say stock, supply, what is available, what is not available, so that it can guide the industry. It's extremely important they do that now. And I mean, this is the best time they need to be firm. You don't create a market. And this is what I'm trying to get at. NNPC was a monopoly for so long. You don't replace a monopoly and now say that, okay, now we have a refinery, everything is going to be from here. That for me is just a swap of monopolies. It shouldn't be that way. NNPC, if and when she's running, should be able to come to the table. The refinery should be able to come to the table. And at the same time, you have major marketers, you have independent marketers who've been in the industry for decades. There must be a collective play of everybody.
Now we have the Port Harcourt Refinery, we have the Warri Refinery as well. And just last week, Mr. Pratt, Dangote himself made a statement saying that he does not think other refineries in the country can function. That's after they've spent over $18 billion on trying to rehabilitate them. Now, seeing that Dangote has been reducing fuel price, I would like to know how you think this would affect other local refineries operational or under construction, and also Nigeria's broader energy independence goals.
Now, the first question, do I think it will have major implications or not? No. I mean, let's divulge these issues. You've got the Port Harcourt Refinery, you've got the Warri Refinery, you've got the Kaduna Refinery. Those refineries, and I've said this often, have reached their best buy date. They didn't reach that because of the age. They're older refineries. But when you have a culture of maintenance that is ignored, you find out that with every time you need to crank or restart something, if you haven't fixed the parts that need to be fixed, you end up doing more damage to that refinery than good. What has happened with those refineries is that we've started to pump so much money into it. While the issues of accountability are neither here nor there, those need to be addressed. It also means that if you're putting so much money in, but the output is not efficient, then you're wasting money. If you're going to sell it, you need to sell it. The question now becomes who buys it? But the point is also that the modular refineries that are already in place cannot scale to the size of larger refineries. So they'll continue to play their part in terms of gas oil, in terms of marine gas oil, maybe naphtha if they're lucky. Fuel oil, they'll continue to do that and solve regional problems. But ideally, what it does mean is that I believe there's a refinery that is supposed to come up in Akwa Ibom. I think that's the Boa refinery. I mean, these things still need to happen. We haven't gotten to the stage where we say we have enough refineries because we have a super refinery. No. But you find out the refineries play is to crack crude and then sell her products both locally and internationally. From an energy security point of view, it does mean that the more refineries that we tend to have in Nigeria, it means that our import and export balance is a positive in our favor. Because what it means is that we're refining, we're able to feed some local needs, and we're also able to export. So sub-Saharan Africa, you see now becomes, from an energy security point of view, our output on refining becomes very high. But it also means that it also meets local capacity, and we are still allowed those who want to import. So I think we're going in the right direction. We just need to be clear and consistent on that basis.
Well, just before I let you go, Mr. Pratt, let's look at the broader picture. What do you see as the likely outcome of this pricing strategy on Nigeria's fuel market within the next 6 to 12 months?
12 months is a long time in oil and gas, sadly. And if you look at it that a few months ago, we were talking about the possibility of a war between Iran and Israel. You saw how prices went up. You saw how freight channels around the, the Strait of Hormuz became blocked. Prices, tensions. So what it is that two things need to happen. The US is increasing shale. Saudi Arabia wants to keep on producing. Nigeria must find her way, first and foremost, to a consistent 2 million barrels per day. Because the impacts of that on the budget are enormous. Why do I say that? We had hinged our budget expectation, and I believe on 2 million or 2.05 barrels a day, $75 per barrel. Now, the dollar has gone up and down. We have some form of stability in terms of exchange rate. But Two things we still cannot control is where will oil prices go? What does Nigeria need to do to be able to try and cushion that effect? We need to move away from 1.4, 1.5 million barrels a day and get into the neighborhood of 2 million barrels a day. With more crude oil, we have a bit more of a shock, more resistance in terms of the shocks that are coming. We'll continue to watch global prices, but it also means that locally, then it means that freight, bringing that crude locally, is to your advantage. It also means that your crack spread are now growing in terms of your distillates compared to how much crude you're buying. Every time they import more WTI, there's more freight to come into that party. So these are the things Nigeria needs to be clear about the energy transition plan. Be clear about our fossil fuels and how we continue to grow it. But I think one major thing to say in completion is another major move and positive for Nigeria, so that we begin to also dwell on gas. The CNG initiative is also something that is very good. So I think with that 6 to 12 months, we should get off the ground. I'm not so sure we'll get to 45,000 feet yet, but we should get off the ground in terms of consistency. That is what I would say.
Well, the Chief Operating Officer of Iona and the Country Manager at Trade Grid, Mr. J.D. Pratt, many thanks for sharing your insights. Well, as the Dangote Refinery continues to reshape the downstream sector, Nigerians and indeed the industry will be watching closely to see whether this competition leads to greater efficiency or unchecked dominance. That's our conversation on the program today. To stay with us for more stories shaping business and the economy. I'm Opeyemi, Owoseni. Thanks for watching.